Don, it's always great to have you on the road with Tommy. Thanks for coming back. I think it's your fourth or fifth time on, and it's the first time that you're on as the CEO of a publicly traded company. First and foremost, congratulations for taking Kodiak public. How does it feel?
Well, it's great to be here, Grayson. Thanks for having me on yet again. I have definitely lost count at this point, but it's been a while since we've chatted. A lot has happened in that amount of time. It feels really good, honestly. It's been an exciting year for Kodiak. Certainly a challenging one, but we made a tremendous amount of progress. I'm sure we'll talk about some of that today. And yeah, we've hit the ground running. Had a couple quarters under our belt now, and we're off to the races, so to speak.
No, you're off to the races autonomously, Don. You got to get the word autonomous in there.
That's
How is your management style changed since you went public? Are you still the Don of old, managing the company the same way, or do you have to manage a little bit differently?
Not much internally has changed. You always go in cycles in terms of how much time you spend internally in the company focusing on the product, on the execution, on the partnerships versus fundraising, investor relations, and things like that. And so for me, it's we're just in a cycle where I get to spend a lot more time on execution, and that's the time that I like to spend. So it's been quite nice. Obviously, some things change. You're thinking about quarterly cycles. There's more SEC filings. The constituency on the investment side is different. You have analysts who are constantly reaching out to get more information, which for me it's been a breath of fresh air. Honestly, I've really enjoyed the transition to the public markets as opposed to the private markets. You get a different set of investor groups that you get to talk to. It's a new conversation. They haven't necessarily heard the same thing year after year after year going. So it's been fun, I think, so far, and the team continues to execute. So I can't complain.
No, and you've been doing well, as you know this. Wall Street's judge quarter to quarter, but since we first met, you have this long-term vision. How are you keeping that long-term vision intact from a strategy standpoint?
Well, one of the important gating items, which I've talked about in the past, to going public was to actually have a product in the market. I think that's really important. And that, of course, when we launched our driverless service back in the fall of 2024, that checked the box to say, okay, we actually have a product. We actually are going to be generating revenue with the product. And that's real driverless revenue. I don't mean just safety driver testing revenue, which lots of companies have and we've had for many, many years. I mean an actual product in the hands of a customer. And of course, we've scaled that over the course of the year. And so that gives us something to talk about. That gives us a product to discuss. It gives us growth metrics, and I think gives the investor community and the public some kind of insight into whether or not the technology works, whether or not the technology is going to grow, whether or not this is going to be real. So that was one of the things that I think was really important for us before we made that decision. And I think the timing was right, and now we're really building.
I mean, the timing was right. The model was right. If you look at the growth of the oil market, especially where you're operating in the Permian, it's been a year since you've been drive route. And I want to highlight for the audience, Kodiak doesn't own the trucks. They're owned on your partner Atlas Energy's balance sheet. Two things. One, why make the decision to have your partner own the assets? And what have you learned over this last year of operating in the Permian, which could be a hostile environment?
We've learned a ton. So just to unpack that, you asked a couple of questions there. First off, we've always wanted to have an asset light business model, right? We don't want to be owning the assets. I think that's something that for us is the most logical choice. And we don't want to have to do more than our core competency. We want to focus on our AI software. That's always been our bread and butter. That's the expertise of the company. We're not a logistics company. We don't necessarily have a lot of experience in running logistics. And so for us, we really want to let our customers who have decades of experience running trucks handle the running of the trucks. And we're going to supply the technology, we're going to supply the support, the updates, the monitoring, the systems that we really understand well and feel like can add a lot of value to. We want to effectively bring the same service that a driver brings to a company today, but through a virtual driver through the AI system, of course, to lower cost, increase efficiency, and most importantly of all, improve safety of the system on these roads. In terms of what we've learned, oh man, it's been quite the journey for us. I think the first and foremost thing I would say is we've learned that there's a lot to learn. And if you listened to me on the earnings call, the Q3 earnings call, I talked about the 3 pillars of autonomy. And I really think about autonomy as technology being the first pillar, safety and safety case being the second pillar. And by the way, everybody focuses on the first one, right? All the conversation is generally around the technology, whether that's hardware or software, but the safety case is often overlooked, and it's a big challenging part of the problem. And then the third pillar is the product, meaning if you have great technology, and even if it's safe, can you actually deliver a product that's usable and valuable to an end customer, whether that's a business, whether that's a consumer? And so really developing the product side of the coin has been an eye-opening experience for us. I know there's a handful of other companies, certainly Waymo has been front and center in developing the experience over the last several years of a driverless vehicle. And I'm sure as you test these vehicles a lot, you see the differences between the actual user experience. I don't mean the driving. I don't mean the driver. I mean the getting in, calling it. I think you had some challenging experiences at CES maybe a few weeks ago with interacting with self-driving vehicles. And so that's what I mean. And when you actually have a product you've sold to a customer, so they own the asset, they bought the asset and they're paying for the asset. Think about any product that you buy, you expect it to work, right? It's got to work, and it doesn't work sometimes. It doesn't work most of the time. It needs to work all the time. And Atlas is a really challenging stress test of the technology because they're already a 24/7 business. They're operating these trucks 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, night, rain or shine. They almost never shut down their operation other than in very extreme weather circumstances. And so we kind of jumped into the deep end on that front. Most other autonomy companies are going to take really gradual steps. Even a robotaxi company, as an example, if a given vehicle is not working quite right, or the passenger experience wasn't right, or they have an issue with the vehicle, it doesn't have to pick up the next passenger. It can just drive away, it can go around the block, it can return home, they can diagnose it, and they can send it back out. Now, that's going to hurt your margin, right? That's going to hurt your efficiency. But nobody in this industry talks about efficiency today. Nobody's talking about numbers, right? They're only talking about experience. We don't get to do that. Our system has to work all the time. And that's a huge challenge, right? And we can unpack some of those challenges as we go. But really, jumping in the deep end of having to support a customer continuously every hour of every day, especially for a small company like Kodiak, has been by far the biggest challenge. It's not about the technology. It's not about the safety. Those we are, feel we're on very solid ground and have been for quite some time. It's about the product. It's about the positioning. It's about the user interface. It's about all of those types of things.
And it's about operations. On the robotaxi side, a lot of the companies are struggling with operations, and frankly, you can't figure it out. If you look at your partner, Atlas, they've got operations down to a science. What have you learned from them as it comes to operation?
Well, the primary challenges on the operational side for a self-driving vehicle is positioning, because these are dynamic environments. There's no one size fits all, right? Yes, we have a handful of pickup locations, and those are relatively well understood from a high level. But when you get down to the day-to-day, the folks on the ground, the operations managers, the people who are actually responsible for churning through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trucks per day, and it's a kind of a well-oiled machine. When you throw autonomous vehicles into the loop, and they need to coexist with traditional manually driven trucks and drivers who are on the clock, drivers who are impatient, operations managers who need to get the product to the customer, customers who are demanding it, yesterday, and things need to move very quickly. So if anything's clunky, if there's any stumbling, it becomes highlighted and people notice. So really, it's the pickup and drop off that has become a lot of the focus as we start to scale the business. Because when it's one or two, you can kind of gloss over it. You can use people, whether those are remote folks or people on the ground, to kind of help grease the skids, so to speak, keep things running, keep the trucks moving. But when you start to get to 10, 20, 50, 100 trucks, that becomes much, much more difficult. So the user interface, the remote assistance, the remote piloting using our assisted autonomy solution seamlessly with the way that they need to run their operations. That's effectively what offering a product is all about. So the pickup and then the drop off. So in the oil wells, Atlas does not own those sites. Those are owned by other operators, right? And so there's more restrictions on what you can do, what we're allowed to do. And so we have to learn to handle each one of those types of situations, work with all those other companies, work with additional personnel. Again, the trucks are programmed to go to specific places, but if that's not where the operations manager wants them in that specific moment, they need to be able to quickly tell them to move left, right, forward, back, turn around, whatever it is. And minutes matter. So sometimes there's a slowdown, sometimes there's a hiccup in the system, and those are the types of bugs, those are the types of inefficiencies that we're constantly trying to squash and we're constantly trying to work on with our customer Atlas.
That's fascinating. So if I heard that correctly, Atlas is making the decisions of where the trucks go. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So they're Atlas's vehicles. Atlas has an interface we've integrated with their transportation management system. That's an in-house system that they developed. And they can command and coordinate the vehicles and tell them where to go, where they're going to pick up, where they're going to drop off, which customers of Atlas they're going to serve on that day, on that route. And these routes are always changing. So typically, they're only running a route for a couple weeks at a time. So we're constantly moving these routes around. They're driving to different places, and so it's a challenging situation.
Are you able to do this because Kodiak doesn't rely on HD maps, or technically, how are you able to do that?
Well, the HD maps conversation really comes in when you talk about what are you mapping, right? Traditionally speaking, the concept of HD maps was utilized early on when vehicles were driving in and around cities, in and around metropolitan areas, even whether that's a highway or a freeway, interstate environment. There's a lot of structure in those environments. So I really started to talk about structured versus unstructured driving for autonomy, and this is also relevant to our defense work as well, where things have to be necessarily unstructured. And in the Permian, especially as you get out into the well sites, there's no structure. There's no buildings, there's no lamp posts, there's nothing human built out there for miles and miles and miles. Now, occasionally you'll come across a building, occasionally you'll come across a depot or a drop site, but those are also always changing. They're always being configured. They're being put up, they're being taken down. And everything else out there is just plants. It's plants that are blowing in the wind. It's a lot of dirt roads. It's a lot of sand. The sand is shifting. And so I think those types of environments, while you could probably show a proof or a demonstration that mapping based approaches can work, I don't think they're well suited to that type of environment because you're not really mapping anything in the traditional sense. Like a map has to represent a fixed environment, and this environment is anything but fixed. So, yes, Kodiak has not used high definition maps since day one. This is something that we've designed into our system. And I think it has really helped us expand into unstructured environments that are relevant for customers like Atlas, places like the Permian, but also defense work and other areas as well.
You've made a lot of right decisions going back to the founding, and for the listeners and viewers, you can go back and listen to Don's past episodes. We did one whole episode, just you and me, on sensor pods, and we did one on the OEM agnostic platform that you have. And then at CES, by the way, your booth was really nice. And the thing I noticed about it, the red of the Kodiak truck matched the red of the Bosch booth. So well done there. But you announced this deal with Bosch that's going to give you the ability to build a redundant platform that you're jointly developing that is OEM agnostic to scale. I said this to you privately. Burnette was right. How did you make these all these decisions with the no HD maps, the sensor pods, platform agnostic, where you've seen, unfortunately, some of your competitors have stumbled? What was the foresight to make these strategic decisions going early on?
Well, it's hard to necessarily pinpoint where the foresight comes from. It's a lot of it is experience, having been around multiple autonomy programs that relied on HD maps and had all the challenges that comes with them. I wanted to find a way to move away from that paradigm, and I got a sense in 2018 that the world of AI was changing. It was still early, very early days there, but the thought was, and we discussed this in the very first week of the company, if we believe that these AI accelerated perception systems, as we referred to them back then, were going to become good enough that we didn't have to rely on prior data, whether that's a map or otherwise, and they could just perceive the environment in real time and understand the way humans do, that how to interact with that environment, how to proceed and drive safely through that environment, then we shouldn't need that prior data. And therefore, let's make the bet. And you have nothing to lose when you start a company. When you're starting from scratch, you have nothing to lose. Let's make the bet that that's the direction to go. And then from there, we also have been always guided by the principle of cost optimization, capital efficiency, proving that this can be developed, built by a smaller, hyper-focused team on a significantly less budget than what we had seen in the past. And so when you start to think about what partnerships do you form over the years, you need to be really strategic. You can't just throw everything at the wall. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to work with these OEMs and these tier ones and these partners, and you pay a lot for that. You pay a lot of NRE, you pay a lot in resources, you pay a lot in development costs. If you don't feel like you're going to get the value, and then it's not just about the value in total, it's about value on what time frame. And so along the way, it was clear to me, and I think to others as well, that the selling the dream, selling the hype, selling the promise of this revolution that we all were claiming is coming at some time in the future, undetermined, is not going to cut it forever. You kind of get a grace period for some number of years, but I don't know how many years that's going to be, and I don't think anybody knows how many years that's going to be, right? If we can't build a profitable company in the first decade, maybe that's okay, but we're not going to get 2 decades, right? You get 6 years, but maybe you don't get 12 years. And so for me, it's always been about finding a path at the appropriate scale. And that's the other thing. I think people have been blinded by this notion of scale as this concept that one day we're going to wake up on a Monday morning and there's going to be 10,000 or 20,000 autonomous vehicles, whether those trucks or cars, just like drop from the ceiling or drop from the sky and poof, they're everywhere. It's like, wow, we've reached scale. Well, it doesn't happen that way, right? You're going to start with 1, you're going to start with 5, you're going to start with 10, 50, 100, 1,000, etc. And there's going to be a continuous spectrum, or incremented by some number of vehicles, right? Not fractional vehicles, in order to get to that scale. And you got to get your first vehicle out there. That was really the insight. It's like, we just need to get 1 vehicle. We need to get 5 vehicles. We need to get 10 vehicles, because we're going to learn a ton from that. And you don't need a massive OEM program, just to use one example, in order to get those first 5, 10 trucks, right? You need to have a path, but you need to be learning along the way, because one of the worst things you can do is lock your design in early before you've learned everything. And the other thing to consider is that hardware technology is changing every single year, right? The hardware we want to put in our trucks this year is way different than it was 2 years ago, and it probably will be different 2 years from now. So our strategy has always been find the efficient path with the right partners on the right timeline that is right sized for our deployment today and into the future. So we need to be mindful of the long term. We need to have a plan of how to get to scale, but we also have to have a plan of how to deliver sooner than later, so that we can show that growth and prove that growth and start to generate revenue. And that's kind of been the guiding principle behind all of these decisions. We've been talking about the importance of OEMs for many years. I fully agree that OEMs play an important role in the development of autonomous vehicles, particularly autonomous trucks. Nobody's denying that. But here we are now turning the corner of 2026, and they're still not here. Everybody's talking about it, everybody's working on it. And there's some really well meaning people and companies that are actually trying trying very hard, excuse me, to get this out the door in a safe and reliable and cost effective way. But it's hard. It's hard and it's not here yet. It will probably be here sometime in the future, but we want to make sure we have a strategy to bridge the gap between that eventuality and what we can offer our customers today.
If you use the Wall Street term, on day one, you de-risked your business because we've seen over the last decade in autonomous trucking where certain OEMs have been a problem and have posed risks. And we've seen companies that are embracing the Kodiak model. To me, it was I look at it as a risk mitigation tool from day one.
Absolutely. We want to maintain optionality. Optionality is always power. You don't want to lock yourself into any one vendor, any one choice, or any one direction if you can at all avoid it. And for us, taking the sort of tier one approach to developing the initial version of this technology was the only practical solution. And I've been talking about this for many years, and I think you're starting to see others in the space take that approach as well. Maybe that's what you were alluding to. And so, yeah, I think there's some vindication in that hey, Kodiak was right, and what we've been working toward all along is likely going to be the path that others take as well. And by the way, now we're years ahead because we started this a long time ago, and we actually have a platform that we can put out now. Excitingly, at CES, we announced the partnership with Bosch. Bosch, as you know, and as our listeners will know, is the largest automotive supplier on the planet. And so it's a really amazing opportunity for us to go and finally build a system that can get to that next scale, can do so reliably, and can get there at a reasonable cost. And you mentioned the redundancy platform, but it's not just that. Of course, Bosch makes amazing automotive components like redundant steering, redundant braking, redundant power systems that OEMs already use today, but they also build sensors, right? They also build AV components, they build compute systems. And so for us, Bosch represents the potential for a one-stop shop as opposed to a multiple tier one sourcing opportunity to build the system. But it's not also something that is going to be all or nothing, right? It's not like Bosch is building a package that Kodiak will or will not put on our trucks in the future. We've specifically and strategically positioned this relationship such that we don't have to wait for some of the longer term items to be available before we can take advantage of the shorter term items. They have sensors that we can use. They have steering systems that we can use. They have other systems that we can use over time. And through the next generations of the Kodiak driver, we'll be incorporating Bosch technology more and more into the system. And so we've again maintained optionality and flexibility as to how we move from our production system that we have on the assembly line today towards that lower cost, higher efficiency, more reliable solution that we're developing over the next couple of generations.
You hit the nail on the head. Optionality, and that's what you've given. Will some of those Bosch components then go to Roush to start to get integrated into the Kodiak trucks? Is that how that's going to work, or how will that work?
One of the great things about Bosch is that they're already so well integrated with many of the OEMs today. So what we're building with Bosch is a solution that can both be delivered to Roush as a part of our retrofit system that we deliver to customers over the next several years, and at the same time also integrated at the factory with an OEM relationship. And so it's kind of a best of the both worlds that Bosch offers. And this is something that really Bosch is uniquely able to bring to the market. And so that was one of the really exciting things about working with Bosch. And of course, it's been a long road to get to where we are today in terms of Kodiak's experience with deploying and developing self-driving vehicles. And I think I won't speak for Bosch, but I think one of the things that was really attractive is that Kodiak is uniquely positioned as a company that has deployed driverless systems, not just as a demo, not just as a test case, not just to say, hey, it's here and we're running an occasional run like once a day. These are systems that are in the field, in the hands of customers, day in and day out. And we have those unique learnings that we can then work with them to rely on. We have those learnings that we can pull from that can help in the design, engineering, and manufacturing of the systems for tomorrow.
And for the audience, in your last SEC filing, you publicly disclosed the V8 trucks operating with no human in the cabin. That's impressive. In the Bosch press release that was put out by Bosch, it said multiple OEMs. You unlock scale. So you're keeping the OEM agnostic, but unlocking a massive amount of scale. And just reading the press release to me says, okay, well, you can go to deal with Acme OEM, Bob's OEM, Jane's OEM. I said, holy shit. This thing basically has no limit to how big it can scale. Am I reading that right?
You're absolutely reading that right. There is really no limit to how this can scale, and that's the intention, right? If you're going to design a bespoke system for every single make and model of vehicle on the road, that's a very inefficient way to bring technology to the market. And I think it was 10 trucks that we announced latest as at the end of Q3. So that's a little bit dated at this point. We haven't come out with our Q4 numbers just yet as of this recording. But of course, we will update. We'll update you as soon as we can. But we're growing, we're expanding, and Bosch represents the future of the Kodiak driver and our ability to build a common platform that is available on multiple makes and models of vehicles. And that's also something that the end customers are going to like as well, right? They want to know that the components, most trucking companies are multi-sourced. They buy from multiple manufacturers. And under the hood, they want consistency. They want reliability. They want common parts so that maintenance is easier, right? So we're trying to think about not just getting a truck on the road. That's usually where people are focused. We're trying to think down the line, how are customers going to actually interact with this technology? How is it going to affect their day-to-day business? And how can we make it as easy and seamless for them to adapt self-driving into their fleets?
And it's not a political statement, but we need self-driving. You see the statements coming from Secretary Duffy, Secretary of Transportation, and the CEO, JB Hunt. So there's a clear driver shortage there. I'm curious. So they can do the redundant platform, and goes back to the thing I love more than anything about your company, the sensor pods. Will Bosch also manufacture the sensor pods for you as part of this platform?
We haven't specifically detailed what Bosch or others will manufacture as a part of this announcement. That's something that we'll definitely have forthcoming.
You got a lot of things forthcoming, and you've said this in public statements. Second half of the year, drive route over the highway on public roads. How are you preparing for that?
Yeah, it's an exciting phase for the company. Obviously, that's the holy grail. That's the reason that most of us got into this space originally. And I know it's been a decade now since I've been working on trucking. So obviously getting highway driverless launched is a core priority for the company. One of the things that we're taking from our current deployment is not only the technology side of the coin, where of course it is common technology across our fleet. And we have a single AI solution that operates in all three of our verticals, whether that's highway product, whether that's industrial trucking, whether that's defense. But then the experience on the safety case. We've gone through the safety case process. We've iterated on the safety case process. And every time we launch a new version of the software, a new capability of the system, we go through and we update the safety case as we go, and make sure that the system is still safe for the given desired operational domain. And so we have a lot of experience there that we think is going to help propel us to a driverless launch on highways. And then from there, it doesn't stop. And this is also the thing that I think you need to remember. We don't want to just announce achieving driverless and then say, okay, we've got a truck, or we've got two trucks, or now we're running, one route a day. We want to be able to quickly scale the solution. And so this is all about sequencing. The Permian and the opportunity with Atlas has been an amazing sandbox for all the things to come. Yes, you achieve driverless, but then what? What comes next? How do you interact with customers? How do you go through all those product learnings that we talked about earlier in the episode? We have those learnings, we have that experience, and we can take that experience to our over the road customers like JB Hunt, like Werner Enterprises, like others, and immediately hit the ground running to accelerate the deployment into 2027. And so that's really the idea behind how we decided to sequence our deployment, generate revenue today, get established with a customer, start small, grow, expand as we go, get to over the road and be ready to really hit the ground running and start to scale the fleet.
What type of lane should we look for? Obviously, the most common, most trafficked, or used to be most trafficked drive route lane over the road was Dallas to Houston. When you have a presence in Dallas, you're next to In and Out. So I hope at some point you'll haul In and Out burgers. You got the facility right next to you. But what type of lane should we look for?
You're going to see similar lanes to what we drive today. So we're active on Dallas to Houston, as you well know. We also go up to Oklahoma City. So we have Dallas to Oklahoma City, and we also do Houston to Oklahoma City through Dallas. But the real marquee lane for us is Dallas to Atlanta. And that's a multiple hours of service lane that we've been running for many, many years now. And we feel like that's the true unlock for self-driving technology because it specifically addresses a need that's not met in the market today. You can't move goods quickly through the Dallas to Atlanta stop without either resting overnight or having team drivers. And so this is really going to unlock a capability that carriers do not have today. Instead of having to pay two drivers to take the load in a 15-hour stretch, you can pay only a virtual driver, right? You have to rely on node drivers. And there's other complications that team driving brings to the table. And so we're really excited about routes like Dallas to Atlanta.
I'm curious, and this is more of a traditional trucking question, but have you noticed any patterns in the data of what type of freight goes on that lane? Are there any, I guess, is it water? Is it beer? Is it bread? Have you noticed any common denominators in the type of freight that's moved there?
Well, we move specific types of freight for specific customers, but broadly speaking, I mean, there's everything. Everything moves along those corridors, particularly the cross country corridors. So you've got freight that's coming into the East Coast, moving to the West Coast. You've got freight that's coming into the West Coast, moving to the East Coast. And I-10 and I-20 are not the only routes across the country, but they are very, very popular routes. And so I think you're going to find pretty much every type of freight. We work with CR England to move refrigerated goods. I was actually talking to, I don't know if you saw the Bosch keynote at CES, but they had a professional chef up on stage talking about how great the AI integration with some of their appliances, specifically their cooktops. And during the keynote, I was actually sitting next to him and his wife, and they were talking about the importance of refrigerated carrying and how food spoilage is such a massive problem in America because we grow a tremendous amount of food that doesn't have time to make it to people's tables. And so if we can accelerate shipping of food products at low cost, and that's the key because we can ship things. That's not a problem, but it's expensive to get it there fast before it spoils. And it doesn't outweigh the value of what people are willing to pay for that food on the other end. That's the challenge that we have. We can't move it fast enough and cheap enough to get it to people who actually need it. And so they were really excited as we were kind of talking about the future of autonomy and how it affects their lives. But there's just a tremendous number of opportunities, such as agricultural goods and refrigerated goods as we expand.
We need yummy tummies, and you have the Maha movement now. We're trying to get more healthier foods, and autonomous trucking allows the ability to move it there from a business model perspective. Obviously, in the Permian, Atlas owns the asset. How is the model going to work when you transition to over the road?
That's exactly the intention. We want to be an asset-light company. We want our customers to own and operate those vehicles. We want to be the technology provider. We're going to play a support role. We're going to ensure that the technology is being used effectively, that it is efficient, that it is safe, that it is reliable, that it is maintained. Those are all the supporting roles that we play, but ultimately we do not want to be owning the assets and running the service.
Smart. Well, as you're let's call it your customers, will own the asset. Will you still keep a small test fleet to constantly train and enhance the Kodiak driver over time?
Of course. So that will never go away. We will maintain a test fleet, a development fleet, or even a concept fleet. I've heard multiple terms thrown out there. So that's not going to stop, right? We're going to have to continue to push the technology forward, expand it into new domains, open up new lanes, open up new capabilities, make the system better for our customers and our future customers. And so that will never stop, right? We're always going to keep pushing on the technology, pushing on the AI, and that will require a testing and development. And of course, we will maintain a fleet as we continue to test.
When you pull the driver out, we're going to have you back on to break it down because I want that to be a whole episode into itself. Kodiak goes driverless in two different terrains. Until then, Don, what is the future of Kodiak?
Well, the future of Kodiak is incredibly exciting. One thing that I've been focused a lot on over the last year is the advancements in AI specifically. And not just as it pertains to self-driving or self-driving trucks, but I'm really excited about all the opportunities within physical AI. And to me, self-driving is a specific application, and in particular, trucking is just a specific application. We used to think about that as the technology, like I'm developing self-driving trucks. But the way the technology has evolved, it's evolved in a much more general way. What we're learning is that physical AI more generally requires certain applications, certain techniques of taking data center scale algorithms, the types of algorithms that we're all familiar with these days at hundreds of billions of parameters, and distilling them down into small AI systems that run at the edge. And what that means is low power. And so when you combine the two challenges of physical AI, which I believe are data collection and low power inference, that's really the future of any company working in this space. And that's really the way I'm thinking about Kodiak AI in the future. It's not just about the specific trucking application. We already have three verticals within self-driving, and there's more verticals to come. This technology is going to be broadly applicable to driving tasks. But beyond driving, I think there's lots of opportunities within the physical world. And that's really exciting because things are generalizing, algorithms are generalizing, capabilities are generalizing. That getting the data is still a challenge, and miniaturization and low power operation is a challenge. And that's where Kodiak's technology really thrives.
The market's shifting towards low power. And the other thing, as somebody who's building something in AI, is memory. The memory is getting really good going into these systems. And when you have low power with a great base of technology and memory, you can build something truly special. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Kodiak. Don, as always, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy, and we can't wait to have you back.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Grayson.